You're listening to Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer, with how modern marketers can thrive in the ever-changing and often intimidating landscape of digital marketing. Your survival guide begins now.
Welcome back to Adapt and Thrive. I'm Tom Gallego. It's Caroline Morris. Today's topic is the state of organic social media, part 2, biotech and health and sciences, with all the other extensions in there, like life sciences, you name it, right? Medical device, pharma, healthcare. So this podcast is for marketing directors, marketing managers, VPs of marketing, anybody that's leading marketing initiatives, groups, or brands in the biotech, health tech, life sciences, medical device, pharma, and healthcare vertical. So let's kick it off, Caroline, and we'll talk about brand teams in compliance heavy fields that don't think social media is for them. We see a lot of different opinions of social media in this very large vertical, and some of our clients, some brands really lean into it, and they develop very well constructed social media strategies, and others tend to shy away from it. Why do you think that is, Caroline?
I think there's a couple different reasons. I think first of all, probably just not knowing which particular platform might make the most sense for your industry. Maybe you're seeing people posting content on like Instagram and TikTok, and maybe you feel overwhelmed, and you're not sure which platform is the right one for you. Which I would say, first of all, LinkedIn is the number one go-to for brands in these kinds of industries. And I think number two would be worrying about compliance, which is something that we are, experienced with dealing with these types of brands on social, finding ways to stay compliant yet still produce creative content, I think is probably a concern for a lot of people. And then just, what kind of content can we make that's going to resonate with our target audience? I would say those are probably the top three concerns.
What are some of the measures you take as a marketing strategist and a social media manager to address some of those concerns?
I'd say, first of all, when it comes to compliance, like I mentioned, that's something we're very well versed in, having had many clients that are in these industries. So it's something that we're familiar with. We understand that there is a certain checklist that we need to follow. So that's something that we put into our planning stage for any client in these industries that we work with. We have that to go off of first and foremost. I think second of all, I think a lot of times people can worry about the approval process potentially being too cumbersome. You're worried about maybe, checking to make sure that everything is compliant, but how exactly is that process going to work? So I would say one of the things that we implement with our scheduling software is something that helps a lot. And this podcast is not sponsored by Gain, but I love Gain, our scheduling software, because it makes it so easy to leave edits. So we'll sort of have a process with us and who we have approved the content first before it goes to the client. So we're already doing our internal checks, making sure everything's aligned before it goes to the client to review. And then from there, our scheduling software Gain just makes it super easy if you need to leave any feedback. So I think we really we understand the concerns, and we have a checklist that we follow when it comes to compliance, but we also have really streamlined the process when it comes to approvals. So that I think just saves so much time in order to make effective content, but also make it efficiently.
Let's look at some quick do's and don'ts for social and regulated industries, right? And it really revolves around fear of non-compliance with HIPAA, FDA, et cetera. Limited internal resources or review bottlenecks, dry or overly technical content that doesn't engage. And that's an interesting one because we see that a lot, and it doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah, no, we've, I think, had a lot of success I think there's maybe a misconception that you have to be, just posting maybe infographics or just focused on sales. But what we're seeing, particularly on LinkedIn, is that human focused content tends to work the best. That's not to say that you can't, post sales posts as well in there, but just having that good balance can really help with engagement, with brand visibility, um, having people trust your brand. I think, people want to see faces in social content. That is what generally performs the best. So really trying to find that balance is something that we do, is making sure that we're promoting whatever it is that your brand is offering, but also trying to find a balance between that and the content that we know performs well on social. I think over the past couple years, LinkedIn as a platform has seen an explosion in video content. So it's something that you might think is only right for Instagram or TikTok, but that's not the case. You really should be posting video content on LinkedIn. And we've implemented that ourselves for our clients. And since doing that, we've seen a growth in followers and engagement. People really want to see dynamic, interesting content on LinkedIn too, and humanistic content as well. And I think video content in particular really gives the viewer a better opportunity to really understand who you are as a brand.
Really cool. And other ways other tactics or, emphasis on humanizing our client's brand would be staff spotlights, behind the scenes, thought leadership, animated explainers. Can you touch on some of those as well?
The way I would kind of summarize this is, don't feel like just because you're in a technical field, you have to pigeonhole yourself into one type of content. There are opportunities there. I know it can be difficult when, you're super busy with your business, but that's why we're here to help, is to help you figure out what kind of content is going to work. And we're going to, give you guidelines for that type of content that's more humanizing for your brand. So, we've seen success when we have a client, for example, that is attending a summit. We post recaps of that. Those tend to perform well. Really like animated explainers that, if they feature a team member, all the better, that really can put what your brand does into layman's terms. So, part of your audience probably already has a very good understanding of what you do, but another part of your audience may not. And having a human being to help explain that is really helpful. And then behind the scenes content, people, again, that just goes back to trustworthiness. I think just, showing team members actively working, it lends itself to trustworthiness and to just people kind of putting a face to a name, basically, which I think just in general just increases brand affinity across the board.
We were talking, we were talking earlier about the role of organic in a paid dominated world. Um, organic social supports long-term brand trust. And we've seen that firsthand. And maybe is in some ways hard to measure, but we can measure that, right? And we can bring results. And any marketer in this field can use these strategies to bring long-term brand trust. Can we touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing as really with any brand. It's no one wants to be sold to unless they have some idea of who you are as a brand. And it's interesting. It's one of the things I would challenge people to do is if, you have a meeting with someone, or maybe you had a networking event with someone and they're in a specific industry, you can go into your LinkedIn insights and look at who's visiting your page. And I guarantee you that people you just talked to face are going to be visiting your page, and you're going to see their industry and your LinkedIn analytics. So people are looking at your LinkedIn page as a way to get a better sense of who you are. And that's such an important step in the funnel before people are more willing to convert. So just having that brand presence, having something established where you can, separate yourself from other people. Maybe you're doing something that another company's not. And the best way to do that is by portraying it through your organic social media.
So let's say you're a hospital or a health tech company with limited content. Where should they start?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, having a strategy, which is something we touched on a lot in our previous content podcast, having a strategy in place is going to be the most important thing. Understanding who your audience is and what resonates with them, because you can just, throw content out willy-nilly. You can make a graphic and just hope it resonates with the right person, but having that strategy in place, knowing who your audience is going to be the most important thing before you start posting. Second thing is, I think one of the strengths of our agency in particular is we're very resourceful, and I think we're really good at, coming up with ideas when maybe there's, maybe you're a new company and you're not attending a lot of events yet. So you don't have a lot of that in-person content. I think that's something that that's one of our strengths, is being able to find dynamic content that resonates with your audience, even if you don't have a lot of material to work with. So really just, finding formats on social that people are engaging with. So that would be video. We've seen a lot of success with carousel posts on LinkedIn. Anything that gets people clicking and engaging with the post is going to help, boost it into other people's feeds. So that could be taking something that your company does, and kind of breaking it out into, bite-sized pieces of information. Maybe we're making an animated video that breaks down visually what it is that you do, which I think can help a lot of people have a better understanding as opposed to just words on a graphic. Maybe that could be a carousel post where, we have a kind of tantalizing hook at the beginning. And then from there, people are interested and they want to, continue scrolling through the carousel post. So there are opportunities there. I think it just, depends on the platform. And again, knowing what kind of content works well on the platform, we can basically take anything and make it engaging.
Future proofing and best practices. So for a marketer just getting started in organic social, for their company in a highly regulated space, what's your best advice?
First and foremost, having a strategy, and not thinking that just because of you see other brands doing a certain type of content that means you have to jump on that. So, people think of social media as being trends, but I think focusing more on evergreen content is really going to be the most beneficial, for brands in these types of industries. Focusing on things that are going to have longevity, whether that is your research, a blog post, something like that we can promote. Again, going back to talking about the human side of things, really focusing more on your team, and having their personality shine through as well. But again, I think, instead of feeling like you have to jump on whatever you're seeing people doing, it really comes down to the content format is going to be so important. So again, you can sort of take whatever it is that you're doing and put it in an engaging format such as video or carousels, and that's going to have longevity.
Yeah, that's great advice. Um, yeah, what's the one thing we wish more brands in this space understood about social media?
I think understanding that LinkedIn in particular, and it can be other platforms as well, but LinkedIn, that can be where your next big partnership comes from. And that's not going to come if you don't have an established presence on there. We've seen brands and companies, they'll form partnerships just because, we interact with their content, they interact with ours, and then, people get to talking because at the end of the day, LinkedIn really is a human focused platform. And if you're not posting, if you don't have a presence, you could be missing out on some very potentially impactful partnerships. Just having that kind of buildup of content showing that you're trustworthy, that could lead to your next big partnership, which could be game changing for your brand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so, if we were to wrap it up, which I think we're getting to that point, where can listeners go to see some really great social media campaigns, work, case studies?
Yeah, first of all, our website, we have several case studies that go into how these strategies have paid off. I'd also be a bad social media manager if I wasn't directing people to go to our own socials to check out our case studies, which we also post there. And I think, really take a focus on visualizing how these strategies that I've been talking about today have paid off for our clients.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, Caroline. This was really insightful. Great show today. And thank you for listening and watching the podcast. We will post this and get back to you on our next one. And part 3, we've got more to talk about. So thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer. If you liked what you've heard, subscribe and drop a comment on what topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Good luck out there, marketers. Until next time.